So there's a story of Hasidic Rebbe, Reb Yitzchak of Vorki, that some Hasidim were excitedly making the journey to spend Shabbos with him. And they were so excited to go see him that on their way, they cut through a vineyard and they trampled on a lot of the vines for some reason. I don't know why. Maybe in those days the paths between the vines weren't as clear, but anyway, they trampled through and they messed up a lot of the plants. And a guy comes out who's in charge of the vineyard. The vineyard is the property of some wealthy landowner, but the person who was in charge of the vineyard was also a chassid. And he came out and he started yelling at them. What the hell? What the? I don't know what he said. I don't know the Yiddish expression, but he was very upset. And he said, "Where are you guys going?" And they said, "Oh, we're sorry. We're going to see Reb Yitzchak of Vorki." And so the person who was in charge of the vineyard went along also. And he came and he complained to the Rebbe. And he said, "Look," he said, "this is what your Hasidim do. They destroyed many plants in this field. I mean, really, what should happen now is I should be allowed to take them and give them a good beating as punishment." And apparently, that was not an unusual thing in those days. So, so he says to the Rebbe, he says, I want to take them out and I want to give them a beating. And what they did was really unconscious. It was really wrong. It was destroying property, and it would be a mitzvah to beat them. So Reb Yitzchak was just silent. He didn't say anything. And the man took his silence to be an affirmative. So he started to walk out of the room to go get ready to give these guys a beating. And Reb Yitzchak said, "Wait just a moment before you go." He goes, "Yes." He comes back. Reb Yitzchak says, you too are a chassid, and so you know that when you're about to perform a mitzvah, you want to really purify yourself first and prepare yourself for the holy deed you're about to do. So why don't you go take a minute, go and take a mikvah first. Immerse yourself in the waters, take a mikvah. He was a little bit taken aback, but he didn't want to argue with the Rebbe, so he said, "Oh, okay." So he goes and he takes a mikvah. He comes back in. He says, "Okay, I'm ready to do it." He's a little bit more uncertain about it at this point. But then Rebbe Yitzchak said, "Well, also besides taking a mikvah, whenever you do a mitzvah, of course you want to have the proper kavanah. So you want to say the formula, L'Shem Yichud Kud Shabrichu Shechinte, for the sake of unifying the transcendent divine with the immanent divine presence, I'm about to perform the mitzvah." And when the man heard that, he reflected for a moment what it would be to say this intention before going out to beat these guys. He became embarrassed and he realized his folly, and he left. So this is a great story, I think, because these guys were being unconscious. They did trample on the property. They did do something wrong. And from the perspective, perhaps, of pure din, pure judgment, perhaps this chassid had the right to punish them for that. But the genius of the Rebbe's response was to cause the man to lift up out of the motivation to beat them, which was clearly coming from a place of ego. And so often this is the case, that we don't differentiate between what is correct, perhaps on an intellectual level, and where our motivation is coming from. So spiritually speaking, this type of work in which we seek to become more awake, is part of awakeness, is knowing where we are coming from, being able to look inside and see where the impulse to act is coming from. I want to look at a text, Pirkei Avot, this famous line, Hillel Omer al tifrosh min hatzibor. Hillel said, don't separate yourself from the community. Now this is sort of a general thing. But then it says, Va'al ta'amin ba'atzmecha ad yom motcha. Do not trust in yourself until the day of your death. This is interesting. Don't trust in yourself. Shouldn't we trust in ourselves? But the context of this is to train us to not immediately trust in whatever thought happens to be in our mind. Whatever impulse happens to arise, don't trust in it until the day of your death, meaning on the spiritual level, until you can rise above that sense of self, which is ego, until the ego dies, until you can discover yourself, discover the part of yourself that's beyond ego. And then here's the real practical conclusion of the whole thing. Al tadin et chavercha ad shetagia limakomo. Don't judge your fellow until you have reached their place. Perhaps you can see that someone is off base, is wrong, is doing something wrong, or is doing something that is at least triggering you in some kind of way, making you feel bad. But before you judge that it's all their fault, have you seen it from their perspective? Well, of course not, because we can't see something from someone else's perspective. So therefore, we have to rise above we have to use our minds to rise above our minds. We have to know that there's more perspectives than the one that we are currently looking through. And that's not hard to do as long as we remember to do it, as long as we remember this aphorism. Al tadin et chavercha ad shetagia limkomo. Until you've been in their shoes, until you've seen from their point of view, which of course you're not really going to do. So that means don't leap to judgment. Al tadin. So if you're not going to judge them, well, then what should we do? What should we do? This is the preferred path. This is from the Amidah. This is talking about the divine. Mechakel chayim bechesed. Sustaining the living with kindness. Okay, so in other words, remembering to, in our interactions with people, coming from a place of kindness. This is the old imitatio Deo, right? When we talk about qualities that are divine, these are really qualities that we should embody. Mechaye metim barachamim rabim, enlivening the dead. So, applying this when we see people, when we interact with people who seem to be not fully alive inside, is there a way that we can connect with them and help them to come back to life? Mechaye metim barachamim rabim. Compassion, rachamim, means giving kindness, means choosing kindness even when they are bringing upon themselves the opposite of kindness. Even when they may be doing something that could deserve din, but the default should not be din, it should be rachamim. Somech noflim, supporting the fallen. I really want to point out this phrase, somech noflim, supporting the fallen. Because this state of being nofal, or noflim literally means the fallen ones, those who have fallen. We know that when we fall in our own lives, when we fall, we recover, and that's a power to be aware of. That's a power to give thanks for and to call upon in prayer, that power of the divine, which is somech noflim, which lifts us up. And paradoxically, the way we open ourselves to this power of somech noflim is through the quality of hod, which we talked about a couple weeks ago, which is humility. To, if we've fallen, then to admit that we've fallen. in the admitting, in the not holding ego around defending ourselves, then we can open ourselves to being revived. This is also the process of teshuvah for Elul, admitting when we have become one of the noflim, and also, of course, doing the same for others. If someone else has fallen, can we be somech noflim? Can we be a support for those who have fallen? Okay, we're going to come back to that. Rofei cholim, healing the sick. Matir asurim, freeing those who are bound. Umakayem emunato lishene afar, sustaining faith with those who sleep in the dust. So all aiming towards really somech noflim, supporting the fallen, compassion. The opposite of what we see so much nowadays, where people are trying to tear each other down. So often people are trying to throw each other off the roof. So what does the Torah say about throwing people off the roof? This is from this week's Parsha. Beautiful lines. Lo tir'eh et chamor achicha. You shouldn't see the donkey of your brother or sister. O shoro, or their ox, noflim baderech, fallen on the road. There's that word noflim again. You shouldn't see it fallen and not help. You have to help. Step in and help raise up something that has fallen. And here's another verse. Ki v'nei bayit chadash, when you build a new house. Vasita ma'akeh, you should make a ma'akeh, which is like a little wall, a little parapet, legagecha, on your roof. Velo tasim damim beveitecha, so that you don't put blood on your house. Ki yipol hanofel mimenu. Again, this word nofel, fallen, comes twice here. It's interesting because it says, it doesn't say that, so a person, here in the translation it says, if anyone, so that if anyone should fall from it, right? But in the Hebrew, yipol hanofel, it's actually saying so that a fallen one should not fall from it. So it's kind of saying that there are people who are fallen already, like they're prone to fall because they are they're in a state of fallenness for some reason. This is a great practical mitzvah, of course, to keep your house safe, right? So we don't want to get sued either, of course. But on a spiritual level, this ma'akeh, this wall to build, could also be the walls that we create around our own behaviors that we allow ourselves to do. So maybe wall's not the best word. It's more of a heightened consciousness of what is happening, what is arising internally. What impulses are arising internally, so that we can choose to channel the impulses that we choose to channel, as opposed to simply be taken over by the impulse of din, of judgment, which is very easy to get taken over by. This is associated with the letter Vav. There's a visualization of the four-letter name, the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey, in the body, so that Yud is in the head and Hey is framing your chest, and Vav is the spine, but also representing the belly. and hey, the final hey are the hips and the legs. And so part of the symbolism of Vav has to do with Gevura, which is din, which is judgment, but applying that din, instead of putting that din outward and judging someone else, having that watchfulness, that intensified watchfulness into our own impulses, so that we can not be captured, not be taken over by them. Vav is also number 6, and 6 is the sphera of Tiferet, which means beauty and grace. It's pictured in the heart, so it's in a similar place as the Vav, which is the spine. And the idea is that as we move through our activities in the day, that we can be present in our activities so as to embody that sense of beauty and grace in what we're doing. Okay, so we fall off the roof sometimes, so we can get back on and channel that Tiferet quality. But in order to channel that Tiferet quality, we have to be very aware of the impulses that are the opposite of that. Not to judge ourselves for having it, because it's not even our fault. It's just what is. It's part of actually our training. It's part of what we need in order to become more conscious. Any type of impulses that are destructive within us are actually very, very good if we use them in the right way, if we use them to become more conscious. So it's not about then adding to the negativity, saying, oh, I'm a bad person or something for having this. No. And by the way, if we fail, if we do get taken over, so that's an opportunity for tshuva. That's an opportunity for hod, for humility. In the Integral Kabbalah practice that some of us do, the letter Nun, which stands for Nofel, which is fallen, leads right into Hod, which is humility. So it's understood that this is part of the process of life, that we will fall again and again, but that fallenness can be applied in a positive way by helping to come ad yom motcha, to the day of your death. That is the death of the attachment to status, to an identity that has some kind of status to it. Let go of that. Let Hod take over, the power of humility. Be grateful that you're alive, that you have the opportunity to do this practice. Then do tshuva, put yourself back in alignment with the divine impulse, which is all of the sphirot, but especially Tiferet, which is the channeling of grace and of rachamim, which are beauty, I should say, beauty and rachamim, which are really two different things, but they're both embodied by Tiferet. Beauty has to do with flow, how we move with things, how our actions have consciousness in them, and rachamim really is more relational, choosing chesed over din, over judgment. And we can do this. We can do this, as it says in the very beginning of the Parshat that we looked at on Sunday. Ki tetzei la milchama al oyevecha. When you go to do battle against your enemies. So we could see this verse as referring to the initial state, or the initial impulse that we may feel to go into battle. Someone does something or says something we don't like, and we have this initial impulse to go into battle. But untano Adonai Elohecha biyadecha, the divine puts victory, puts netzach into your hand, v'shavita shivyo, so that you can capture not oyevecha, not your enemy, but capture shivyo, capture captivity itself. So in other words, the ego has this gravity to capture us, to ensnare us, but through the grace of Hashem, we can capture it. We can capture the feeling of the impulse of captivity that emanates from ego, and we can recognize that ability to be free through our heightened awareness is itself a gift from the divine. Hashem puts it in our hands if we open ourselves to that kavanah, and that's part of the theme of this time of Elul, is taking a prayerful attitude to ask the divine for help in connecting with that which is our own deepest nature, that which is beyond, always beyond ego, and that from which wisdom, chokhmah, rachamim, bina, understanding, and hod, humility, and gratitude, all the positive qualities emanate from that level of our being and are available to us to the degree that we can remain conscious and free from being captured by that seductive tendency toward identification with thought and impulse. So that's why we say slichot at this time. Slichot, prayers to have the power of somech noflim, to feel that support from the divine that's there for us.